Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
Hare Krishna. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavaam, Canto 2, Chapter 6, entitled Purusha Sukta Confirmed, Text 20. And it's April 11th, 2020. And I'm here with Ramachandra and Bhakti Keith Prabhus. I'm Dhira Govinda Das, and here online we got Eze, Narayan, Malini, George, perhaps Danielle and Saraswati are also there. Laura Levin, welcome Laura Levin. And Brielle, Rukmini, Dominique, perhaps Gaetano is also there. And Ladini Shakti. And perhaps we have a mobile phone, LG Stylo 4, not quite sure who it is. And Leah's here. And maybe that's Kim on the mobile phone. Okay, so we're reading from text 20 of chapter 6 of Canto 2 of Srimad Bhagavaam. Okay. Padastraya Bahi Cha Asan Aprajanam Ye Ashrama Anta Trilokya Tu Apara Griha Medha Abrihatrata Padastrayo Bahishchasan Aprajanam Ya Ashrama Antastri Lokyas Tvaparo Griha Medho Brihadvratam Padastrayo Bahishchasan Aprajanam Ya Ashrama Antastri Lokyas Tvaparo Griha Medho Brihadvratam Padastrayo Bahishchasan Aprajanam Ya Ashrama Antastri Lokyas Tvaparo Griha Medho Brihadvratam. Who else would like to chant the verse?
Padastriyo Bahishchasan Aprajanam Ya Ashrama Antastrilokyas Tvaparo Griha Medho Brihadvrata.
Would anyone else like to chant?
Padastrayo Bahishchasan Aprajanam Yashrama Antastrilokyastvaparo Grihamedho Brihadvrata.
Padastrayo Bahishchasan Aprajanam Ya Ashrama Antastrilokyastvaparo Grihadmedho Brihadvrataha.
Parastrayo Bahishchasan
Padastrayo Bahishchasan
Aprajanam Ya Ashmrama
Aprajanam Ya Ashrama
Trilokya Svaparo
Antastrilokya Straparo
Grihamedho Brihadvrata
Grihamedho Brihadvrata
Adastrayo Vahishchasan
Padastrayo Bahishchasan
Aprajanam Ya Ashramaha
Aprajanam Ya Ashrama
Antastrilokya Svaparo
Antastrilokya Straparo
Hamedho Brihadvrataha
Grihamedho Brihadvrata
Padastrayo Bahishchasan
Padastrayo Bahishchasan
Aprajanam Ya Ashrama
Aprajanam Ya Ashrama
Antastrilokya Svaparo
Antastrilokya Straparo
Grihamedho Brihadvrata
Grihamedho Brihadvrata. So now we cite the word for word responsibly. Padatraya,
Padatraya,
the cosmos of 3/4 of the Lord's energy.
the cosmos of 3/4 of the Lord's energy.
Bahi,
Bahi,
thus situated beyond.
thus situated beyond.
Cha,
Ja,
and for all.
and for all.
Asan,
Asan,
were.
were.
Aprajanam,
Aprajanam,
of those who are not meant for rebirth.
of those who are not meant for rebirth.
Yea,
Yea,
those.
those.
Ashrama,
Ashrama,
status of life.
status of life.
Anta,
Anta,
within.
within.
Trilokya,
Trilokya,
of the 3
of the
worlds.
3 worlds.
2,
2,
but.
but.
Apara,
Apara,
others.
others.
Grihamedha,
Grihameda,
attached to family life.
attached to family life.
Abrihatvrata,
Brihadvrata,
without strictly following a vow of celibacy.
without strictly following a vow of celibacy.
Translation. The spiritual world, which consists of 3/4 of the Lord's energy, is situated beyond this material world, and it is especially meant for those who will never be reborn. Others who are attached to family life and who do not strictly follow celibacy vows must live within the 3 material worlds. Purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. The climax of the system of Varnashram Dharma, or Sanatana Dharma, is clearly expressed here in this particular verse of Srimad Bhagavaam. The highest benefit that can be awarded to a human being is to train him to be detached from sex life, particularly because it is only due to sex indulgence that the conditioned life of material existence continues birth after birth. Human civilization in which there is no control of sex life is a 4th-class civilization, because in such an atmosphere there is no liberation of the soul encaged in the material body. Birth, death, old age, and disease are related to the material body, and they have nothing to do with the spirit soul. I'll read that sentence again. Birth, death, old age, and disease are related to the material body, and they have nothing to do with the spirit soul. But as long as the bodily attachment for sensual enjoyment is encouraged, the individual spirit soul is forced to continue the repetition of birth and death on account of the material body, which is compared to garments subjected to the law of deterioration. In order to award the highest benefit of human life, the Varnashram system trains the follower to adopt the vow of celibacy, beginning from the order Brahmachari. The Brahmachari life is for students who are educated to follow strictly the vow of celibacy. Youngsters who have had no taste of sex life can easily follow the vow of celibacy. And once fixed in the principle of such a life, one can very easily continue to the highest perfectional stage, attaining the kingdom of the 3/4 energy of the Lord. It is already explained that in the cosmos of 3/4 energy of the Lord, There is neither death nor fear, and one is full of the blissful life of happiness and knowledge. A householder attached to family life can easily give up such a life of sex indulgence if he has been trained in the principles of the life of a brahmachari. A householder is recommended to quit home at the end of 50 years, punch a shordvam, banam vrajet, and live a life in the forest. Then, being fully detached from family affection, he may accept the order of renunciation as a sannyasi fully engaged in the service of the Lord. Any form of religious principles in which the followers are trained to pursue the vow of celibacy is good for the human being, because only those who are trained in that way can end the miserable life of material existence. The principles of nirvana, as recommended by Lord Buddha, are also meant for ending the miserable life of material existence. And this process in the highest degree is recommended here in the Srimad Bhagavaam with clear perception of ideal perfection, although basically there is no difference between the process of Buddhists, Shankarites, and Vaishnavites. For promotion to the highest status of perfection, namely freedom from birth and death, anxiety, and fearfulness, not one of these processes allows the follower to break the vow of celibacy. The householders and persons who have deliberately broken the vow of celibacy cannot enter into the kingdom of deathlessness. The pious householders or the fallen yogis or the fallen transcendentalists can be promoted to the higher planets within the material world, 1/4 of the energy of the Lord, but they will fail to enter into the kingdom of deathlessness. Brihadvratas are those who have broken the vow of celibacy. The vanaprasthas, or those retired from family life, and the sannyasis, or the renounced persons, cannot break the vow of celibacy if they want success in the process. The brahmacharis, vanaprasthas, and sannyasis do not intend to take rebirth, apraja, nor are they meant for secretly indulging in sex life. Such a fall down by the spiritualist may be compensated by another chance for human life in good families of learned Brahmins or of rich merchants for another term of elevation. But the best thing is to attain the highest perfection of deathlessness as soon as the human form of life is attained. Otherwise, the whole policy of human life will prove to be a total failure. Lord Chaitanya was very strict in advising his followers in this matter of celibacy. One of his personal attendants, Chota Haridas, was severely punished by Lord Chaitanya because of his failure to observe the vow of celibacy. For a transcendentalist, therefore, who at all wants to be promoted to the kingdom beyond material miseries, it is worse than suicide to deliberately indulge in sex life, especially in the renounced order of life. Sex life in the renounced order of life is the most perverted form of religious life, and such a misguided person can only be saved if, by chance, he meets a pure devotee. Hare Krishna, welcome. Om Gyanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manobishtam Stapitam Yena Putale Svayamupakadamayam Darati Svaparantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri Tapadakamalam Shri Guru and Vaishnavam Cha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Saganaraganatam Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sagana Lalita Shri Vishakanditam Scha Hey Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jagapate Gopisha Gopika Kanta Radhakanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Garange Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Hari Priye Vansikalpata Yubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhyeva Cha Patitanan Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shri Vasari Gaura Bhaktivinoda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Desha Tarine Nainam Namaskricha Naram Chaganotamam Devim Saraswatim Yasam Tato Jayamudirayat. Before reciting the Srimad Bhagavaam, which is the very means of conquest, one should first offer respectful obeisances unto the personality of Godhead Narayana, Narayana Rishi, the supermost human being, unto Mother Saraswati, the goddess of learning, and then to Srila Vyasadeva, the author. Nasta Praya Shrabhadreshu Nicham Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavad Gita Bhakti Bhavati Naishtiki. Text 20 of chapter 6 of Canto 2 of Srimad Bhagavatam. Kadastrayo Bahishchasan Aprajanam Ya Ashrama Antas Trilokyas Trapara Grihamedho Grihadvrata. The spiritual world, which consists of 3/4 of the Lord's energy, is situated beyond this material world, and it is especially meant for those who will never be reborn. Others who are attached to family life and who do not strictly follow celibacy vows must live within the 3 material worlds. Hare Krishna. Okay. So, spiritual realization and sex pleasure go ill together. So we're not talking here about what's good or bad or right or wrong or moral or immoral. I mean, we could talk about morality and ethics and like that. This is just that that the more that we're addicted to material pleasure, to sexual gratification, the more that we have attachment to that, then the less we'll realize that we're not the body, because sex pleasure is pleasurable. Kind of an obvious point. So it's pleasurable, and so then that increases attachment, that I will be happy and fulfilled by bodily pleasures. It increases that attachment. So just if one's goal in life is actually realizing who I am as not this body, spirit, soul, spiritual realization, then sex pleasure goes ill with that. We might sometimes hear, yes, but what about Tantra? If I say Tantra, then my sex pleasure is completely supportive of spiritual life. These are just things we hear sometimes. So, almost surely not. So this is a principle. Spiritual realization and sex pleasure go ill together. So if our goal, we all get to choose our goals in life. If our goal is spiritual realization, then it's recommended to achieve that goal, to transcend, eliminate, or at least regulate our attempts at sex pleasure. Okay. And Prabhupada, this is very interesting here. Prabhupada makes the point here, and he says that basically there is no difference between the process of Buddhist, Shankarites, and Vaishnavites. We don't hear that from Srila Prabhupada too much. Very interesting, very interesting. No difference between Buddhism, Shankarites means the non-personal path, and Vaishnavites. Maybe some details. We're used to hearing, those who heard Prabhupada's lectures, study these books, what? Someday he comes down and he points out the distinctions, and he seems critical of the Buddhist path and the non-personal, impersonal path coming from Shankaracharya. And so what do you mean there's no difference? So this is striking. This is striking. So of course it's a Chincha Beta Tattva, and Chincha Beta Tattva, it's the Vedic conclusion that we are simultaneously one and different from God. It's simultaneous one and difference. This is the ultimate Vedic conclusion given by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu through the Parampara, through Srila Prabhupada. And it's kind of like an expansion and a deepening of partial conclusions like Advaitavad, radical non-dualism, or Vishishta-Advaitavad. Okay. So Prabhupada's here, he's emphasizing the oneness. And the oneness is that attachment to material pleasure, which is exemplified by sex pleasure. Attachment to that is the cause of misery. Attachment to that is the cause of misery. And so to achieve spiritual bliss, to achieve spiritual peace, we need to detach from that. And Prabhupada's emphasizing the oneness here. And that's what the Buddhists are saying. And that's what those who follow the impersonal path are saying. And that's what the Vaishnavas are saying. So there's no difference. There's no difference. There's no difference. And of course, Prabhupada here, he is not referring to the Buddhism coming out of Hollywood. We get that. He's not referring to the impersonal philosophies coming out of the yoga studio down the block. Okay, we get that. He's talking about the real thing, and he's honoring real Buddhism, the real path of the Buddha, the real path of those who follow Shankaracharya. He's honoring that here. And he's not talking about Sahajya Vaishnavas. Yeah, in purport to the first verse of Srimad Bhagavatam. Srimad Bhagavatam has 18,000 verses. And the first verse, which starts with the line, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Janmatyase Tonbaya Vitarata Strate Svapigeshu Svara. Prabhupada, in the purport, he quotes Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and pure sex psychology. Pure sex psychology. Okay, that talks about the Madhurya Ras and relationships between gopis and Krishna. The idea, though, is that if we have any inclination or attraction to, what to speak of attachment or addiction to material sex life, then we are not qualified to enter into the pure sex psychology. And if we think we are, then that becomes what's called sahajya. It becomes faking, pretending in the name of spiritual life, and that does great harm. Shruti smriti purnani pacharatra itim prida akantiki harer bhakti utpata yaiva kalpate. That if we endeavor to do so-called devotional service, not following a bona fide spiritual master, not according to the Shruti, the Smriti, the Pancharatra, the Puranas. Prabhupada sometimes talks about mother Vedas and sister Puranas. And if we endeavor to do devotional service not according to that, it just becomes a disturbance to ourselves and to our community. Prabhupada emphasizes that. So Prabhupada's talking about in terms that whether it's the Buddhist or the real followers of Shankaracharya, these are very strict people. Then there's no difference, because the idea is to detach from all material enjoyment, no nonsense like that. And then, if we're on that path, whether in the name of Buddhism, Shankaracharya's devotional service, if we're on that path, then we can focus our mind on spiritual life, on realizing who we are, spirit, soul. It's described in Bhagavad Gita. What's the verse? Bhogeshvarya prasaktanam taya parita chetasam vevasaya nika buddhir samadaya navidiyate. That for one who's too attached to sense gratification, the resolute determination for devotional service will never take place. It's not like damn to hell or something, because we always have the choice to detach from sense gratification, to make that a lot less of a priority, and then so if we want to be resolute, if the mind's gone here and there. Now, Prabhupada's focusing on the oneness, but the way he terms this is very interesting. So Prabhupada says, and this process in the highest degree is recommended here in the Srimad Bhagavatam with clear perception of ideal perfection, although basically there is no difference between the process of Buddhists, Shankarites, and Vaishnavites. So this phrase is recommended here in the Bhagavatam in the highest degree. So there's oneness, because all those paths, sincerely, those who are sincere practitioners, all those paths are sincerely dedicated to detach from matter. But in the highest degree, because the Bhagavatam's giving a path where the soul gets a higher taste. So it's not just a matter of don't think about sex, don't think about sense gratification, which can be like whatever you do, don't think about a pink elephant flying to the moon. Just don't. Oh, you just thought about it. Oh my God, you ruined everything. Okay, so and in one sense, because it's described in the Bhagavad Gita, Vishya Nivartate, Niraharasi Dena, Masavardha Masopisa Paramjishta Nivartate. That Krishna says, unless we have a higher taste, it's practically impossible to give up the lower taste. It's practically impossible to give up the lower taste. Unless, Prabhupada gives the example often, if a child is doing something destructive, and we tell the child, look, stop it, just sit in the corner, do nothing. Then the child can sit in the corner and do nothing for maybe 2, 5, maybe even 10 seconds on a good day. But then it's going to need to do the destructive thing again because it needs to be active. But if instead we give the child something that's constructive, healthy, and it's more fun than the destructive thing, then the child doesn't even think about the destructive thing. So that's more intelligent parenting. That's higher level parenting. So that's what it means that Bhagavatam is giving this process of detachment in a higher way because it gives the higher taste. The nature, that's a verse from Bhagavad Gita that says we are eternally persons. Persons means we have senses, we have desires. And to try to squelch them, to try to suppress and repress them, that's artificial. So the bhakti path is not a process of elimination. Don't do that, don't think of that. It's a process of transformation, transforming the quality of our desire, transforming the quality of our dancing, of our eating, of our relating, and dovetailing it, directing it in devotional service. And in that way, Nitya Siddha Krishna Prema Sajya Kabunai Shravanadi Shuddhachitte Karye Udai. That this love of Krishna, this devotional service to Krishna, is eternally situated in the hearts of all living entities. It's not something to be acquired from some external source. And this process of hearing and chanting, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, awakens that natural love for Krishna. So this is positive engagement of the spiritual senses. It's not just negation of the material senses. It's described, Vasudevi Bhagavati, Bhakti Yoga Prayojita, Janayat Yashuvayam Gyanam Chayata Hetukam. That when we engage, by engaging in devotional service to Sri Krishna under the guidance of a bona fide spiritual teacher, we automatically get detached from matter without separate endeavor. We automatically, naturally get knowledge, get realization of who we are, spirit souls, as eternal servants of the Supreme. So it's described in the Bhagavatam, Pumsastriya Mitunipa Metam Tayor Mitavida Grantimahu, that not in the heart. That not in the heart means the false egos, that misidentification of the self with matter, that root cause of all fear, the root cause of all insecurity and anxiety. That not in the heart, the crux of it, is that attraction between male and female. And we act on that attraction, and that increases the illusion. Janasi moho yamahama mameti, increases the illusion that I am this body and this is mine, and all of that, all of those attachments that cause one misery after the next. So the recommendation for those who are spiritually intelligent is to really make liberation from the cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease our primary goal. This goal can be achieved in the human form of life. This is the special gift, Atato Brahma Jigyasa. Now that we've achieved a human life, this is the now we have the special opportunity. We can think about these things. We can make our goal realization of who we are as not this body, as eternal spirit soul. And that's why, that's why so the idea is to be completely absorbed in bhakti, in devotional service, and then material desires diminish and go away. But by the nature that we're here in material existence means we're not completely absorbed in Sri Krishna, the personality of Godhead. I mean, we're here to forget Krishna and to try to further the illusion of this dream identity, this false ego identity. So it's recommended to regulate. Without regulation, then it becomes dvipada pashu. Then it becomes two-legged animal life, and then it's just the mind and senses. That's what we talk about, regulative principles. Krishna uses that term in the 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the regulative principles of freedom. So the regulative principles, whether it's around regulating our sex activity or our diet or intoxication, the idea is to give these things up completely. And okay, if we're not ready, there's some regulative principles for sex life and like that. And the idea of regulation, it's not to oppress or to suppress, it's to free. Example we often give, just like if I want to drive, so I'm here in the USA, so we drive on the right side, that's the law. Red light means stop. So if I want to drive from North Florida to Miami, and I think, but I'm not going to be limited by rules because I'm a free person. I'm a free, independent person. I'm not the type of person to be limited by rules. So if I feel like it today on my way to Miami, I'm going to drive on the left side of the road. When I see red, for me, that might mean go very fast. That's freedom. Now, we all know that that sort of freedom will limit my freedom, either in a hospital or with debt, or maybe in prison. Right? So no, these are rules of the road. Drive on the right, stop at a red light. I'm inspired to follow these rules of the road. They free me to achieve my goal. Similarly, if I want the goal of self-discovery, realizing who I am as an eternal spirit soul, if I want the goal of realizing love of God, I really want to go on that path sincerely, then there are certain rules that support me in that. Certain rules that support me in that, including regulated sex life. And and so this, Prabhupada says some interesting things here. The Varnashram system trains the follower to adopt the vow of celibacy beginning from the order of brahmachari. The brahmachari life is for students who are educated to follow strictly the vow of celibacy. Youngsters who have had no taste of sex life can easily follow the vow of celibacy, and once fixed in the principle of such a life, one can very easily continue to the highest perfectional stage, attaining the kingdom of the three-force energy of the Lord. And then he talks about the age of 50. So Prabhupada says one can very easily continue. Now, of course, amongst the regular principles for those endeavoring to be a little serious in Bhakti Yoga, this sex life regulates principle, that's the one that gets the most protest. I mean, everyone knows that's the one that gets the most protest. But then, so it's point that Prabhupada makes the point, and it's true, it's completely true, that if someone's trained as a child in these principles of restraint and austerity, then not that there's not struggle, but it's relatively easy. If we grew up on Western TV and movies and Pop-Tarts and just, if we grew up just in that whole sort of materialistic culture, then it's just like, no sex life except for procreation. Well, this is crazy. If we grew up in that craziness, then it's like, what? I'm rebelling, the whole thing. But Prabhupada makes the point, if one's trained from childhood, then it's easy, natural, peaceful. Not that there's no struggle with the senses, but so what he's saying is true. And then the idea is, okay, there's still some attachment, so do 25 years or so in Grahastha ashram and like that, and then renounce. He mentions about the age of 50. Vanaprastha, I remember when I was sharing Bhakti Yoga in the Arab and Druze villages. And the Druze, they're like they're actually a Vedic sect transplanted to the Middle East. But the past 1,000 years or so, they're sort of pretending to be an unorthodox sect of Islam. Actually, I lived with the Druze and shared Bhakti Yoga with them, and they shared with me. I remember in one particular village, I went, it was the high school, it was the principal of the high school. So he was one of the few villagers who spoke English. And so he welcomed me in. I just knocked on his door and he welcomed me in. And just then I showed him Prabhupada's books, and he already knew, he immediately knew he was taking a whole set of these books for him and his children and his grandchildren. He immediately knew within 2 minutes, oh, I definitely want these on my shelves. He could see these are godly books. This is real philosophy. He got that. And then we schmoozed and kibitzed and had a very meaningful conversation and exchange. And just in the course, I didn't mention this topic at all, but in the course of the exchange, he was 48 years old at the time. He goes, yes, and in 2 years I'll be 50. At the age of 50, then it's time to give up my career and to just focus on God. And he specifically said at the age of 50. Right? So again, the Jews, they're from the Vedas, but the world doesn't know it. Although I wrote a book about it. So, okay, but he said,
That's out.
yeah, the secret's out. So, so these are universal principles. Again, it's not about you should do this. It's like, if our goal is spiritual realization, God realization, then these are basic principles that everyone knows who's not into just scamming and cheating and things like that. It's just known. And it's a very regulative process. Prabhupada in the purport, he gives the example, the pastime of Lord Chaitanya and Chota Haridas. It's a very important pastime. Well, it's a very interesting pastime. It's described in the Ancha Leela of Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita. And so, okay, the word, actually it was a few weeks ago, Malini and I, we discussed this pastime. So Prabhupada writes, one of his personal attendants, Chota Haridas, was severely punished by Lord Chaitanya because of his failure to observe the vow of celibacy. Now, I won't go into too many details here, but Chota Haridas, if we were to examine what he did, I think any of us here, even if we gave like a strict definition of celibacy, we would see he didn't violate any vow of celibacy. He talked for a few minutes to an elderly woman. Okay. Anyhow, so the emphasis here, just like Prabhupada emphasized the oneness between Buddhists and Vaishnavas and impersonalists. more often Prabhupada emphasizes the distinctions. So Lord Chaitanya, let's get things in perspective. Lord Chaitanya was in the renounced order of life, and which means no intimate contact with women. Certainly not going to be touching women. So there's one pastime where Lord Chaitanya, he's in the temple of Jagannath Baladev in Subhadra, and he's absorbed in looking at the forms of the deity. And there's, right? And then some woman comes from behind and climbs on his shoulders because there's a big crowd and the woman's short and she couldn't see the deity. And she wanted to see the deity, Jagannath Baladev in Subhadra. So she climbs on his shoulders to get a view of the deity. So then Lord Chaitanya's assistant, Govinda Das, he got really angry at the woman. Hey, what are you doing? And he goes, get away. And then Lord Chaitanya got angry at him because Govinda Das was simply doing a service. He was establishing boundaries for Lord Chaitanya. He was simply doing a service. But Lord Chaitanya got angry at him. What are you doing? And Govinda, what do you mean what I'm doing? A woman just climb your shoulders. You don't get near women. And he goes, if I had, and Lord Chaitanya says, if I could just have a fraction of a percent of that woman's eagerness to see Krishna, my life would be perfect. And so he was just so different pastimes illustrate different principles. So this pastime with Chota Haridas that Prabhupada mentioned here, that's Lord Chaitanya, he's foreseeing, or maybe even at that time he was witnessing, he's foreseeing that in the name of this bhakti yoga and devotional service, there's going to be so much faking and pretending, and there's going to be so much mundane material sex life in the name of the rasa dance and like that, in the name of the devotional principles. And so Lord Chaitanya is being hard. Sri Krishna, God and his expansions and his pure devotees, they're ready to be hard as a thunderbolt and soft as a rose, depending on the situation. We don't want to imitate, but we do want to aspire for that. We're ready to shift our energy to be however we need to be to support others in their self-realization. And similarly with ourselves, we're ready to be hard as a thunderbolt with myself and soft as a rose, depending on the situation. And so Lord Chaitanya is establishing firmly, rigorously, no nonsense, because Chota Haridas was in the renounced order of life. So Lord Chaitanya is being hard as a thunderbolt there. And as the pastime goes on in some subtle, esoteric, transcendental ways, he's simultaneously soft as a rose with Chota Haridas. So Prabhupada says, that one who's trained from childhood in these principles of austerity and brahmacharya, then it's easy to just follow the varnashram system. So then we might say, okay, well, what about me? I wasn't trained in that at all. I was trained in the opposite. So I guess my situation's hopeless.
Pop-Tart training.
Yeah, what's it called?
Pop-Tart training.
Pop-Tart training, yeah, precisely, yes. Okay, so my situation's hopeless. No. But Prabhupada saying, no, it's not hopeless. Because then Prabhupada closes the purport that okay, whatever our past, we say a lot of times in personal growth, we say two powerful words in personal growth are till now. Okay, till now I've been whatever. And now, here's my resolution. And it's not about my resolution, like because my mind and willpower are so strong. Maybe not. But we take shelter of the pure devotee. If by chance he meets a pure devotee, it's described, sadhusanga sarvashastri koi lavamacha sadhusanga sarvasiddhi koi. That by association, even a moments of sincere association with the pure devotee, then our entire existence is purified. So Prabhupada knew. So in one sense, Prabhupada, when he left India in 1965, he left a nation, a community where even then most were trained in these sattvic varnashram principles from an early age. And very, very few, practically none, were ready to really Sarvadaman Pritya Yamame Kam Sharanam Braja Am Tvam Sarvapapibhyo Mokshayishami Mashucha, were ready to surrender themselves. Kind of like Krishna says that, yeah, there could be so many structures that help us towards self-realization, but at some point those structures become a stumbling block on the path of self-realization. A stumbling block towards complete surrender to God, complete surrender. The structures that help us at one point become stumbling blocks if we're attached to them. So then Prabhupada came to the land of the hippies and the beatniks, and this place of rejecting any sort of dharmic structure. At the same time, he attracted spirit souls who were ready, who were ready to give themselves to this process of transcendence, and by following Prabhupada were sheltered. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, Devi Esha Gunamaya Mama Maya Jaratyaya Mame Dvaye Prapadyante Mayam Etam Taranti Te. Krishna says that this material energy, which is my energy, it's not like it's Satan, it's the devil, it's Krishna's energy, but the material energy, this ekapad vibhuti, that's the 1/4, 25%, compared to the tripad vibhuti, 3/4. This material energy, it's an energy of Krishna, so it's divine, but it's an energy designed to keep us in illusion and to keep us alienated from ourselves and from God. And it's not like, so I'm just a victim of this energy. Well, we're absorbed in this energy because that's what we want. So Krishna is facilitating our desire. So Krishna says this material energy is very difficult it's impossible to overcome on the strength of our own mental or physical endeavors. But Krishna says, but one who surrenders to me, one who surrenders to me can easily cross beyond the ocean of material existence. And we surrender to Krishna. Yasya Devi Prag Bhakti Yata Devi Tataguro Tasita Katitaya Taprakashante Mahatmanana. That by serving with sincerity and trust in Krishna's pure devotee. Hare Krishna. Well, thank you for your presence and listening. I'll read the verse, and then I'll be glad to hear any comments or questions or realizations. Padas trayo bahishchasan aprajanam ya ashrama antas trilokyas tvaparo griha medho brihadvrata. The spiritual world, which consists of 3/4 of the Lord's energy, is situated beyond this material world, and it is especially meant for those who will never be reborn. Others who are attached to family life and who do not strictly follow celibacy vows must live within the 3 material worlds. Hare Krishna, thank you for your presence and attention. Any comments or questions? Bhakti and Brielle.
I heard that that women actually have more lust than men. Is that true?
Okay. All right. So you heard that women have more lust than men.
Yeah, which is different than like what I've heard in society, which is that men are more lusty than women.
Okay. All right. So where did you hear that?
From Ramachandra Prabhu.
From Ramachandra? Okay. All right. So I'll respond to it based on what I've heard from Srila Prabhupada. Okay. So first of all, it's important to understand that we're not women or men. I remember, I was introduced to Krishna consciousness in State College, Pennsylvania. Starting in 1980, I would go to the Prasadam feast, take lots of Prasadam. And the first time I chanted a round of japa was about 3 years later. I remember it was in May of 1983. And it was just a few weeks before I embarked on a a backpacking tour of Europe, and ultimately I went to Israel and didn't come back to the United States for about 8 years. Anyhow, so we chanted that round of japa, and Stambadas, he gave me he said, here, put this in your backpack, maybe you'll use them. So I had japa with me. That's when I started japa, backpacking around Europe in the summer of 1983. Anyhow, so there was a philosophical discussion, and there was one young woman, maybe a year or two older than me. I was 22 at the time. And she started asking something about women and men and like that. And then Stamba, he interrupted politely, but he said, do you think you're a woman? And so I thought, well, that's an interesting response. So it's important to see that, okay, as Teilhard de Chardin said, we're not human beings having a spiritual experience. We're spiritual beings having a human experience. So some of us might be having a human experience as in a male human body or a female human body. Okay, so we don't want to ignore our human experience. Just like if I'm driving in a car, I want to realize I'm not this car, and I do want to know how this car works. Is this the car where if I depress the gas pedal half an inch, it'll go from 0 to 60 quick? Is this a car? Is this a 2-door compact? Is it a 4-door luxury? So we do want to know our psychophysical nature while cultivating genuine transcendence to it. So in terms of psychophysical natures, physically, clearly there are differences between the male body and the female body, generally. And also on the subtle material platform, mind, intelligence, I'm not making a sweeping generalization, but there tends to be differences. For example, an example we give sometimes, let's say there's a room of 10 or 12 5-year-old children. On average, most women are going to be better than most men at managing 5-year-old children. If there's a man who's really good at that, we don't want to discriminate against him. But on average, most spirit souls in women body will have just more of that sort of intelligence. So there's different types of intelligence. Okay, so lust, I want to deconstruct it. Lust means like kind of like sensual, like the consciousness is alive in the senses. Okay, so let's put it this way. Let's say we go into, not that I've done it recently or hardly at all in my life, but let's say we go into a typical men's clothing store. What colors do we tend to see? Just stay with me on this one. So, okay, black, brown, maybe blue, or if someone's like wild or something. No, really. So we're talking about sensory interaction, right? The material senses are active and alive. So now, what's our experience of color if we go into a women's clothing store compared to a men's clothing store?
A lot more colorful.
A lot more colorful, okay? So when we see statements like that, for me, this is a helpful example, a helpful reference point, okay? That in general, and there could be variation, but in general, the spirit soul in a woman's body, their material senses are just a lot more alive and awake to the subtleties. I mean, I gave an example in color, but it's also true of taste. It's also true, okay? Otherwise, so that's an empirical explanation of such statements in the Vedas. Okay? So there's truth there. There's truth there.
The way that I understand that idea and like apply it to my own life and see what I see out like in the world is that like in terms of lust being like desire to be for adoration and distinction and like to be wanted, I do feel like women have that very strongly.
Yeah.
And that when women pursue sex, it's usually more because of that actually than the actual physical experience.
Yes. Yeah.
And then my other question is, so householders who have broken their vow can never enter the kingdom of deathlessness, like after that lifetime? Like once they've broken the vow of celibacy, like that lifetime is just finished basically in terms of their chances.
In the context of the rules and regulations of the structure in Varnashram, like, yeah, like, well, you need to come back again. And then there's the transcendental bhakti context, where whatever the till now has been, we surrender fully, genuinely, and then we transcend our past. And then let's call it the karmic reactions from our past will be summarized. That's why Bhagavad Gita, it gives so many structures: demigod worship, varnashram, jnana yoga, karma yoga, hatha yoga. It gives so many structures. And at the end, Krishna says, Sarvadharman Prityagya Mame Kam Sharanam Vraja Amtam Sarvapapyabhyo Makshai Shami Mashucha. So this philosophy, there's no eternal damnation. That okay, whatever we've done, past lives or this lives, we have the opportunity, particularly in the human form, to fully surrender. We have the opportunity to fully surrender, and then our past reactions are wiped out. Our past reactions are wiped out. But it's not a cheap thing. It means I'm really fully surrendering. I'm really giving up my nonsense ideas. Not just I'm scared of karmic reaction. Krishna, save me, like that. But we're truly surrendering, and then our past, this life and previous lives, that's wiped out. Krishna might still use our past in order to help us to continue to be urgent and steady. But if we truly surrender, then karmic reactions from this life and the past life are destroyed. They're burnt to ashes. So that opportunity is always there. Fourth chapter of Bhagavad Gita, Krishna talks about the one who fully surrenders truly. All their past karma, all the seeds of sin, whether it's latent seeds or fruit of seeds, they're burnt to ashes, burnt to ashes. So that's how powerful bhakti yoga is.
So how does that go hand in hand then with what I've heard also from Ramachandra Prabhu in a previous class, that it takes 300 lives to transcend sex desire?
Well, a statement like that, and that's and we'll sometimes hear, I don't know if Prabhupada directly said 300, maybe he did, and Ramachandra heard it in a class or a letter, but a statement like that's kind of like, yeah, for most souls, even who are pretty sincere, this is not a cheap process. This sarvadharman, it's not a cheap process. Be ready. Yeah, I've entangled myself badly and severely, deeply, like under like thousands of miles of thick mud. I've entangled myself deeply in sex desire and envy and jealousy. So when Prabhupada says things like 300 lifetimes, then he's like, be prepared to work hard. Be prepared to work really hard. This is not cheap.
Thank you.
And philosophically, in one moment, we can be liberated in transcendence. They're both true. Thank you, Bhakti and Bria.
Hare Krishna.
What is wrong with surrender, with attitude of like, Krishna, I am afraid of my past reactions, save me?
You're saying, what about that attitude?
I am saying what is wrong with that.
I didn't say there's anything wrong with it. It's glorious. It's auspicious. We're approaching Krishna. We're approaching Krishna, so it's auspicious. Akama sarvakamava mokshakamu daviditi rena bhakti yogina yadita pushampura. That says whether one has all desire. So like, I'm approaching Krishna out of fear. I don't want to suffer in hell. Oh my God. I don't want to suffer in hell. Krishna, help me. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. And then, as I just said, in the foxhole, there are no atheists. A foxhole is like at the time of war, the soldiers build a war like that. And there's bullets and there's bombs and there's grenades. So in the foxhole, there's no atheists. Oh God, help me like that. So there's nothing wrong with that. That's auspicious. Krishna says, 4 types of people approach me. Those who are in distress, I'm fearful. So we approach Krishna, and that's purifying. And then there are higher, more pure levels. And then we approach Krishna for any reason. It could be our fear, it could be because I want to be rich, so I pray to God. It's all auspicious to approach God for any reason, practically. And then the idea, then we get purified, and then more and more we, like we were discussing, I think yesterday, Narottam Das Thakur, Chakudana Diloye, Janme Janme, Prabhu saying, he's praying to a spiritual master, you open my you open my eyes with transcendental knowledge, with transcendental knowledge. You are my Lord, birth after birth. Meaning like, yeah, of course, I'm gonna suffer sinful reactions. I'm such a wretch. Of course, I'm gonna take birth again and again. Just let me serve you. Nadaram Nadaram Nasundrim Kavitamba Judisha Kame Janmani Janmani Sri Bhavta Bhakti Hitukitva. Lord Chaitanya prays, I don't want women or followers or riches. I just want your service birth after birth, meaning the mentality of such a advanced devotee is like, of course I'm going to take birth again and again due to my karmic reactions. That's fine. Just let me serve you. Let me take birth in hell or whatever. And then with such a mentality, with such a mentality, liberation, which is sought after by the practitioners of Buddhism or impersonalism, the yoga path, Muktir Swayam Mukulitanjali Sevateisman, that liberation is waiting at the doorstep of such a devotee who doesn't even want liberation. I don't want liberation from my sinful reactions. I just want to serve you. So that's a more pure level. But if we're scared of sinful, I've acted terribly. I've hurt others. I've acted like a fool. I've squandered my opportunity, and I have so much suffering reaction. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna. That's the recommended approach. Let me approach Krishna, and that's auspicious. Hare Krishna. George.
Hare Krishna, David. My question is, how do we, because we usually speak of the principle of meeting ourselves where we're at, how do we approach, or what does it look like necessarily from Prabhupada-centered approach, meeting ourselves where we are at, with the goal of making this vow in this life? Does that make sense? Because I feel like I really appreciated your sharing of how, in the context of the Varnashram system, yes, that what is being said in the purport is true about, once you break your vow of celibacy in that context. But in the context of, like you said, where we have all grown up with the opposite teaching from birth till 20s, 30s, whatever. What would you say, or what comes up for you in the context of meeting ourselves where we're at with the goal of taking that vow and not breaking it.
Okay. Thank you, Bhakti George. Thanks for your question. Right, because where we're at, well, yeah, I don't have that training from 2 years old or 5 years old. I have the opposite non-training. It seems to me that genuinely meeting myself where I'm at helps me to make that vow with seriousness, because helps me to make a vow to genuine spiritual life with sincerity, because I'm starting on a foundation where I'm not a pretender. I'm starting on a foundation where I'm not a pretender. I know that, like any wicked or sinful activity that anyone's ever committed, I'm fully capable of. I'm fully capable of. And that's helpful because I know what I'm dealing with. Just like, okay, whatever, let's say if my goal is to get to Miami. Okay, so that's my goal. That's my goal. So, all right, so I'm committed to get to Miami and here like that. All right, well, it's important to know where I'm at. It's important to know where I'm at. If I'm in North Florida, all right, then I go south. If I'm in Rio de Janeiro, I need to go north. If I'm in London, I'll need to go west. So not accepting myself doesn't mean resigned. Rupa Goswami says, Utsanishcha tata pravartana. That he says that to progress on this path, we need to be confident in the path, enthusiastic. So accepting doesn't mean I'm just resigned, nothing to do, I'm stuck, I'm hopeless, I messed up, like that. No, it means I accept where I'm at as a foundation, as a starting point for where I want to go. Otherwise, I'm starting with illusion, I'm starting with ignorance, I'm starting with hypocrisy. Krishna in chapter 3 of Bhagavad Gita, he expresses to Arjuna, don't be a pretender, don't repress. Don't repress. He's not telling Arjuna, just give full power to your mind and senses wherever they want to go. But he's saying, if something's there, like your warrior spirit, don't pretend it's not there. Don't pretend you're a Brahmin. So accepting where I'm at, so then I know, okay, this is the context. This is the context that I'm bringing as a foundation for moving towards my goal. And yeah, I got all this lusty desire, all this propensity for cheating and deception. All right. So I know that this is not a light thing. To progress solidly requires me being deeply committed. It requires me surrounding myself with friends who will give me honest feedback. And so again, acceptance is not resignation, it's just the opposite. I enthusiastically accept where I'm at as perfect and complete for my process of self-realization and moving towards love of God. And it's a context, it's a foundation. Yes, I see this envy in my heart. I see this laziness. I see this complacency. I accept that. I accept that as a foundation for enthusiastically choosing this process of bhakti yoga. Otherwise, I'm starting on the foundation of lying to myself, deceiving myself, then all that stuff that I'm repressing, it will control me from beneath the conscious surface. It will control me. It will come out in all sorts of distorted, perverted ways. Like this is the context. This is just like we gave the example of the car. Okay, so I want to go to Miami. I want to go to New York. I have a destination. So I want to know, I've got a car that when it goes more than 50 miles per hour, it starts rattling, it gets a little risky. I've got this car that it doesn't fit into tight parking spaces in the city. So let me keep that in mind when I go on my journey. I've got this psychophysical nature that when others are successful, I'm not happy for them. I'm envious of them. And I want to pull them down. Okay, if I'm pretending that's not that there and I'm this forgiving, compassionate person, okay, then that envy will come out in nasty ways and I won't even be conscious of it. But okay, I've got this envious nature, I've got this lusty nature. So let me arrange my life so that I'm protected from my lusty nature. Let me arrange my life that, oh, here's that envy, jealousy coming up. All right, I notice it, I'm honest about it, and I'm choosing not to give power to it. I know that, yes, like that. LG Stylo 4, I see a hand up. Okay, I don't know who LG Stylo 4 is. I forgot.
Oh, it's Kim. It's Kim.
Hey, Kim.
I'm on the cellular phone because I have no Wi-Fi. I just was also wanted to mention how, I mean, I've always thought material nature basically gives you a gift in this human body, because at the age of 50 or so, your hormone levels drop. And that gives you, so, when you're told, well, that would be a good time to, of course, all your life is a good time to, work towards this, but that really gives you that leg up to make it easier. And it's funny in this material world, because so many people, when that starts happening, they're so attached, they think, oh, well, let's take hormones, I feel this, going down. But really, it's just a gift, really. So I always think that's really interesting. And then the two other things that the whole thing made me think about, was how Prabhupada came here when all his followers were like at their hormone driven worst, then he had to deal with that, which must have been something. And then the last little thing is I love that story with Lord Chaitanya, where the lady climbed up to see the deities. It just gives you chills, which, so many of his pastimes do. Yeah. Anyway, those were my three things that hit me during the whole thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Kim. I appreciate all those points. Yeah, and that's the idea that right. Also, I remember in the village of Rama in North Israel, and this is a pastime I have included in the book Krishna's Realm of the Druids, and so I just remember I was very struck by it that. So I was knocking on a door. I'm in full devotional dress, dhoti kurta, shaved head, like that. And it's like going through the village is like climbing. It's like mountain climbing, and I have my book cart, and I go to one home, and there was a young man, maybe in his 30s, and he's obviously the man of the household, and he invites me in. He's an Arab Christian. And he invites me in. Is very hospitable, and we start talking. And then I notice in the corner of this big central room, there's an elderly person, obviously like in the process of dying. And the children and grandchildren are there. And then it just struck me that kind of in the culture I grew up, well, when someone's at that stage of life, they should go to a nursing home, or the idea is we need to hide that. We need to hide that. But here, so I could see, it became alive for me that in a culture that truly has spiritual values, the elderly persons are truly the most valued because they have the most spiritual wisdom. And I see that was very alive in this Arab Christian home. Whereas just like what you say, Kim, because the idea now is oh, look, even though she or he is 70 or 80, look, they can still dance at the club. So it's kind of pathetic. It's really pathetic. Because the thing is, as one gets older, materially, sensually, we can do less. And if it's a materialistic, centered society, then one becomes less valuable. As we become older, we can't jump as high, the sex drive is less, and we, et cetera, et cetera. And, but then this is, it's talking about a true spiritual culture where from the time of birth, the focus is liberation from material life, eliminating or regulating sex life. And then at the age of 50, that's supported because the hormones go down. And then whereas like rather than Krishna uses the term in Bhagavad Gita, kama kami. One, kama means lust. One whose desire is to increase desire. And then it just, dushprana and Helena burns like fire, and we pour fuel on the fire. And so in a truly spiritual community that values spiritual values, then as one gets older and has practiced spiritual life through their household life and their childhood, then as one gets older, one looks forward to that time where the hormones are less raging, and I get to focus in more peacefully on what's truly important, and I get to share it with others. Thanks for your comments, Kim. Laura.
I really liked the part when you were talking about like a yogi or someone being able to be like as hard as a rock or as soft as a rose. And I was just thinking about how, I'm nervous. I think sometimes I misplace those two energies, like when to be hard and when to be soft. Like I realized something about myself lately that I've like had some shame around. And I think like my tendency is to be really hard and like try to stomp it out rather than like coming to the place of like being soft and accepting first and then disciplined about it. Like, so that was an interesting thought I had.
Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, so that impacted you, that principle of like a truly enlightened, self-realized person is able at any moment to be soft as a rose or hard as a thunderbolt with others and with ourselves. And I'm hearing, Lara, you can see a tendency maybe like inappropriately or in a way that's not healthy to be hard as a thunderbolt, kind of like maybe trying to motivate yourself to change through shame and guilt, rather than, as George was expressing, rather than starting with accepting myself with empathy and compassion, accepting all parts of myself, the part of myself that's stuck in all of these self-sabotaging strategies, the part of myself that really wants to change, empathy and compassion for all parts of myself, acceptance as a gentle foundation for growth. And you're saying that it's a direction that you'd like to move towards. Thank you, Laura. Patrick. I see a raised hand for Patrick. That's why I called on Patrick.
Hare Krishna, thank you.
Okay.
I was listening, Rebecca's playing the class. I was listening while I was cooking, so I didn't, but earlier you were, in response to Brielle's question about the difference between men and women. And then also there's a theme of this class I'm hearing is the hard as a thunderbolt, soft as a rose. So I just had and we're going to be having more devotional men's groups or men's groups for devotees like that. And so this came up, this gender differences and how much attention to give to it, and is it distracting or what like that. So it's a poignant discussion for me, and probably there's some other men in this call that were there. And so I think, so I have a two-part question. One question is, would you equate the gender differences the same as the material context? For example, like death, disease, old age, birth, like on the same level as that, or is the differences, a lesser distinction? I ask because, Prabhupada, we're spirit souls, so we're not affected by death, disease, old age, and those things. But we spend a lot of time talking about that, talking about death, and talking about the material context. And maybe I shouldn't say something. But so there's also, not wanting to resist reality, not wanting to resist the context of death, disease, old age, material context, and kind of embracing the context, So I wonder, one question is, would you equate the gender differences, differences men and women, the man body, vehicle body, would you equate that with the material context? And another question I have is, how to relate with those gender differences in relationship, because Prabhupada does, so we are spirit, soul, and at the same time Prabhupada gives so much, critique of modern feminism or, modern society when it comes to the roles of men and women and things like that. So he does spend, not too much, but he spends a significant amount of time delineating those differences. So in thinking of this principle of hard like a thunderbolt and soft like a rose, and it's like generally we should be more like a thunderbolt with ourselves, more strict with ourselves, and then with others more soft like a rose. So perhaps a way to approach those differences between men and women is like, for me, thinking of myself hard like a thunderbolt, like, oh, I'm just like Prabhupada says, men are like hogs, dogs, camels, or asses. I'm in just one of those categories. I'm just a man, trapped in that kind of consciousness. But then to see everybody else's spirit, soul, kind of transcendental to the, so it's like treat your wife just like she's a spirit soul. See her as spirit soul, but myself, I'm just a man trapped in all this, like an ass or dog. That was my wondering about what you think about that.
Well, thanks for your sharing, Dr. Patrick. I appreciate your philosophical depth there. Yeah, that's the general principle is to tend to be more rigorous with ourselves, not harsh, but rigorous, and more generous with others. Sometimes maybe someone is under our care and it is our role to point out, some shadow side where we think they're interfering with their own progress. But that's the general principle, to be humbly rigorous with ourselves, not shaming ourselves, but just rigorous with ourselves and more generous in our interpretation of others. And yeah, as far as the gender psychology and because we're spirit soul, materially we're not women or men. In one sense, spiritually we're all prakriti, we're all female. That's a more esoteric point. So our psychophysical nature, including the maleness or femaleness of it, that is part of the material context, just like birth, death, old age, and disease. So one can see that, let's say, like, yes, I have, I'm in this, male. Of course, we understand that someone in a male body might have so many feminine traits generally identified as feminine and vice versa. We understand that. So like, if we say, okay, so I'm in this male body, so I have a tendency towards hard-heartedness. And so it's just like, it's really difficult for me to surrender to God or a spiritual teacher. Oh, that's so difficult for me. And I can see how that's part of this male false ego. So that's in the way. All right, that's part of the context. And that's an opportunity for that really points in a direction for my growth. Or maybe a spirit soul in a female body with a female's psychological nature might say, oh, I have this tendency to be attracted by some male that adores me, but or at least is giving a show of that, and I have a tendency to be gullible and misled. And so, okay, let me notice that tendency and let me be serious about seeking real spiritual protection, because I have this tendency in my innocence and soft-heartedness to be misled. So yeah, that's part of, just like death is part of the context, and disease in this world now, the pandemic, disease, disease is part of the context. So let me respond to my own emotional, psychological, intellectual nature, just like I respond to the context of disease, death, old age. Let me respond to it with urgency and enthusiasm for devotional service. So yeah, definitely The male or female psychophysical nature is definitely part of the material context, like birth, death, old age, disease, like eating, sleeping, mating, defending, like cheating, mistakes, illusion, etc., etc. I'm not sure if I responded to everything you expressed, Patrick, but that's what came to me.
Well, it sounds like you were maybe confirming that that's like a healthy perspective, and so I appreciate that.
Yes. Thank you. Bhakti Keith.
Yeah, years ago when I used to train Tai Chi, my favorite teacher, he said this, that Tai Chi is about, he said it with like extreme passion, like it's about learning to be soft, then you learn to be harsh, you know, and I really appreciated that, and as like what? Yeah, and I try to like use that as a guide to learn how to be hard, you know, that when I have to learn how to be firm, I use that as my go-to guide to know how to do that. But I mean, traditionally I have a tendency to be like pretty easy on other people, but like extremely hard on myself, like to the point where I just like cripple myself. And but I'm having a hard time knowing how to be easier on myself, like especially with things like spacing out or being lazy or not doing things, like not putting priorities first, like best priorities first or stuff like that, which are kind of like ignorance type things, right? Like say I guess with laziness is the easiest example, you know, like laziness is, it's such a slippery slope, right? If I'm easy on myself, then it's so easy just to slip into that, right? Or spacing out, right? If I'm too easy on myself, then I can just get sucked down into it. But if I don't feel like I'm not, if I start freaking out and stressing out and trying to force myself, then it hurts, it causes me damage. So I'm having a hard time.
Thanks for sharing, Bhakti Keith. I'm going to suggest, because this is a theme here, I'm going to suggest we can gently, softly, empathically accept ourselves, including our shortcomings, while simultaneously being resolute in determination to change. There's no contradiction. Resolute doesn't mean harsh, shame, you're terrible. And then let's say I make resolute determination to change, and a day later, a week later, I find that I slipped. Okay, I can notice that slip with gentleness, empathy, and compassion, and then with deeper resolute determination and joyful enthusiasm, I get to resolve with determination to change a mental, emotional, or behavioral habit that I want to change. Just sharing that acceptance with gentleness and understanding and compassion, and simultaneous unbreakable determination to create transformation. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Thank you all for your association. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Jai Srila Prabhupada.
Jai Srila Prabhupada. Hare Bol.